All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking into something pretty crazy.
Yeah.
We've got Elon Musk, we've got Donald Trump, and we've got what some people are calling a constitutional crisis.
It's a lot.
Yeah, so
A lot to unpack.
to help me
What?
unpack all this, I've
Bruh.
got an expert here with me. So
Yeah.
we're going to be taking a look at historian Heather Cox Richardson's latest articles from February 3rd and 4th, 2025.
Okay.
And then also a piece from Wired that kind of dives into the tech angle of all of this.
Sounds good.
So yeah, you ready to jump into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this is wild. I mean, where do we even begin?
Well, I think the most logical place to start is with Musk, right? I mean, he's kind of at the center of this whole storm.
Yeah.
After donating a ton of money to Republican campaigns, it's like he's basically embedded in the government now.
Yeah, and Richardson even uses the word coup in one of her articles.
Yeah, I saw that.
She doesn't pull any punches.
Right. Like, but it's a pretty strong word to use.
Yeah. And yeah, she's a historian, so when she uses a word like that,
She's not using it lightly.
he means it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then there's this whole thing with the Department of Government Efficiency.
Oh, the DOGE.
DOGE, yeah, which,
Catchy name.
yeah.
Yeah, very Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like it's a lot more than just like a cute name.
Yeah, they're not just like offering suggestions or like,
Oh, they're getting their hands dirty. They're in there.
They're in the agencies. And Wired is reporting that they've even gotten into the Treasury Department's payment systems,
Oh, wow.
which handle trillions of dollars and contain like everyone's personal data.
I mean, that's a little concerning.
It's very concerning. And according to Wired, there's this 25-year-old engineer named Marco Alez who has basically unfettered access to these systems.
Unfettered access. What does that even mean?
So he's worked for Musk's companies before.
Okay.
And Wired is saying that he has what are called admin privileges.
Okay, so like a master key. Yeah. Like you can log into any server,
See everything.
see all the files, change permissions, even delete or modify stuff.
That's a lot of power for one person,
Especially someone so young.
especially someone so young. And with ties to Musk, I mean, the potential for misuse is just enormous.
Right. Like imagine blocking payments to people or agencies or manipulating data.
Right. And all with very little oversight.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just him, right? Richardson reports that Musk's team has been going after agencies like USAID, the IRS, even the Department of Education.
Wow. So it's not just about efficiency, right? This seems like a deliberate dismantling of institutions.
That's what it feels like, and that's where we need to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Right. Because this isn't happening in a vacuum.
Exactly. This isn't just some random thing that Elon Musk decided to do one day.
This fits into a much larger pattern.
Yeah. And Richardson actually traces it back to the backlash against the civil rights movement and desegregation.
Wow. I didn't realize it went back that far.
So they've been working towards this for decades.
It seems like it, yeah.
And now they have someone like Musk who seems to operate outside the traditional rules.
Right.
They have a tool to accelerate that agenda.
Yeah. And, he can frame it as, cutting waste.
Sure, efficiency, all the buzzwords.
Right. But the reality is a lot of these programs serve a vital purpose.
They do, and they help a lot of people.
Exactly.
And often the people who are most affected by these cuts are the same people who are voting for Trump.
Yeah, Richardson talks about the cuts to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, the DEI stuff.
Right, which gets framed as some sort of liberal agenda.
But it actually ends up hurting a lot of people who maybe don't realize that they're being hurt by these cuts.
It's cutting off your nose to spite your face, really.
Yeah, and so while Musk is busy on the inside, Trump is up to his old tricks on the international stage.
What's he done now?
Well, Richardson mentions that he started threatening tariffs on Mexico and Canada,
Oh, not this again.
which of course caused the stock market to dip.
Plus.
And then he negotiated temporary pauses that were already in place just so he could claim a victory.
It's like he creates a problem just so he can solve it,
Yeah,
but the underlying issues are still there.
exactly.
The economic uncertainty doesn't just magically disappear.
Yeah, and then there are the tariffs on Chinese goods, which
Yeah.
have now gone into effect and prompted retaliatory tariffs from China.
A trade war, just what we need.
Yeah.
And it looks like they've even launched an investigation into Google.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's getting messy.
Okay, and then just when you think it couldn't get any
It
crazier,
always gets crazier.
Trump drops another bombshell. He wants to take over the Gaza Strip.
What?
You heard that right.
Take over Gaza? What does that even mean?
He apparently wants to turn it into like
This sounds like a terrible idea.
The Riviera of the Middle East.
Oh my
And
God.
unsurprisingly, this has drawn criticism from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, I imagine so.
And a lot of people are questioning both his motives and his stability.
I mean, it sounds more like a distraction tactic to me.
Right.
Get everyone focused on this shiny, absurd thing over here.
While something else is happening over there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be the first time he's used that strategy, but this time it seems especially dangerous.
The situation in Gaza is incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And his involvement could have disastrous consequences.
Okay, so we've got Musk causing chaos internally,
Right.
Trump doing the same internationally,
Set.
and this whole thing with Musk's DOGE team getting access to the Treasury systems,
Right.
that can't be legal.
Well, that's the question everyone's asking.
Yeah.
The legality of Musk's actions is very much in question.
Yeah.
And it's fueled a lot of the talk about a potential constitutional crisis.
Because Congress controls the budget,
Exactly.
not some unelected billionaire.
That's the foundation of our system of checks and balances.
Right.
And the Democrats are making that argument loud and clear.
Yeah.
They're calling Musk's actions illegal,
Unconstitutional.
and they're not just talking. They're filing lawsuits to try to stop him.
And it's not just happening in courtrooms, right? People are taking to the streets.
Oh, yeah.
Richardson mentions protests erupting across the country with people carrying signs like, "Nobody elected Elon."
Yeah, there's definitely a growing sense of outrage.
Yeah.
It's feeling that something fundamental is being broken.
Yeah, and Representative Raskin had a great quote. He said, "We don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk."
He's got a point.
Yeah. And Senator Murphy even suggested that Musk might be motivated by his business interests in China,
Interesting.
who would definitely benefit from a weakened USA.
Right, because that would give them more influence.
It's a very tangled web of motives and potential conflicts of interest.
Yeah, it's hard to know what's really going on.
Okay, so we've got Musk causing chaos internally, Trump doing the same internationally,
Check.
a potential constitutional crisis brewing.
Yeah.
Where do we even go from here?
Well, I think it's important to remember that this isn't just some abstract political drama.
Right.
This has real-world consequences for all of us.
Yeah, like how those treasury system changes could impact our personal finances.
Absolutely.
Or how the cuts to USA could affect global stability.
It's not just headlines, it's our lives.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to understand what's happening and how it connects to the bigger picture.
Speaking of the bigger picture, you mentioned that what Musk is doing ties into a much longer history of efforts to shrink the government.
Right.
So can you kind of elaborate on that a bit more? Like, what are the roots of this movement and how did we get to this point?
Yeah, so it really goes back to the post-World War II era when the government took on a much more active role in things like social welfare, economic regulation, and civil rights.
Okay.
Think Social Security, Medicare, the Civil Rights Act. These were huge expansions of federal power,
Yeah.
and they triggered a backlash from those who saw it as government overreach.
So it's not just about shrinking the government. It's about what that government represents.
Yeah. A more inclusive society, a stronger social safety net. Those are things that certain groups have been actively trying to dismantle for decades.
And they've used a variety of tactics over the years. Voter suppression, gerrymandering,
Oh, yeah.
the influence of dark money, the rise of right-wing media, all of these have contributed to creating an environment where this kind of power grab can happen.
It's almost like they've been laying the groundwork for someone like Musk to come in and finish the job.
Right. And what's scary is that while he claims to be targeting wasteful programs,
Right.
the reality is these cuts will have real consequences for people's lives.
Absolutely. Take the example of the Small Business Administration, the SBA.
Okay.
Richardson reports that Musk's DOGE team was poking around in their systems, too.
Oh,
And that's a big deal because the SBA plays a crucial role in supporting small businesses, especially those owned by women, Black, and Latino entrepreneurs.
right. Under the Biden-Harris administration,
Yeah.
those businesses really started thriving.
Exactly. And now those gains are potentially at risk.
So it's not just about abstract budget cuts.
No.
It's about limiting opportunities and exacerbating existing inequalities.
Exactly. And it's happening under the guise of efficiency, which makes it even harder to fight back against.
Yeah. And they're using technologies, specifically AI, as a key tool in this effort.
Oh, right.
There was this whole thing with AI coding agents that Richardson mentions,
Yeah.
and it's honestly pretty concerning. Yeah, that part really freaked me out.
I can see why.
Like, I get that AI is everywhere these days,
It is.
but using it to rewrite government software just seems like a whole other level of crazy.
It's a little unsettling.
So can you break it down for me? Like, what exactly are these AI coding agents and why are people so worried about them?
Sure. So these AI coding agents are basically sophisticated programs that can write and modify software code.
Yeah.
Proponents argue that they can make the process faster and more efficient,
Yeah.
but critics warn that they can introduce serious security risks.
Like what kind of risks? Give me
Well,
the worst case scenario.
well, one major concern is that AI-generated code can be more prone to vulnerability,
Uh,
which could be exploited by hackers or even foreign governments.
Okay.
It's like building a house with cracks in the foundation.
Yeah.
It might look fine at first, but it's fundamentally unstable.
That's a great analogy.
So basically, they're making the entire system more vulnerable by trying to make it more efficient.
It's like cutting corners on a bridge.
Right.
You save a little time and money up front, but you risk a catastrophic collapse down the line.
Exactly. And another big concern is data privacy.
No.
404 Media obtained audio from a meeting where Thomas Shedd, who
Right?
used to work for Musk and now leads the GSA's technology transformation services, was talking about using these AI coding agents to rewrite the login.gov system,
Right.
which is the portal for accessing all sorts of government services.
Like everyone uses that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
He specifically mentioned changing the system to collect more personal data,
Wow.
which could potentially violate the Privacy Act.
Hold on, back up for a second.
Sure.
I'm not a tech expert,
Okay.
so you're going to have to explain this to me like I'm 5.
Okay.
What's the Privacy Act and why does this matter?
Okay, so the Privacy Act is a federal law that protects the personal information of U.S. citizens that's collected by the government.
Okay.
It sets limits on what kind of data can be collected, how it can be used, and who it can be shared with.
Okay.
It's meant to prevent the government from abusing its power and spying on its own citizens.
So if they're using these AI coding agents to collect more data than the Privacy Act allows, that's a big problem.
It could be, yeah.
And it gets even scarier when you think about who has access to that data and how it could be used.
Right.
And we already talked about how Alez has basically unchecked access to the Treasury systems.
Right. It's a lot of power in one person's hands.
What's stopping him or someone else from using that access to target individuals or manipulate information?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it's not just about individual privacy either.
Right.
There's also the issue of national security.
Oh, yeah.
If foreign adversaries were to gain access to these systems, the damage they could inflict is unimaginable.
It's like leaving the keys to the nuclear codes on the kitchen counter.
Pretty much, yeah.
This is insane.
Yeah.
It's like they're not even considering the potential consequence of what they're doing. And it doesn't sound like there's any real oversight or accountability either.
Right.
Who's watching the watchers?
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Go.
While all of this has been unfolding,
Yeah.
the judicial system hasn't exactly been sitting idly by.
Okay.
A judge recently blocked the Trump administration from freezing trillions of dollars in grants and loans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Essentially, the judge said that Congress, not the president, controls federal spending.
Okay, so at least someone is pushing back.
Right.
But it still sounds like a real tug of war with Congress, the president, the courts, and now Musk all vying for power.
It is.
Where does that leave the average citizen?
In a precarious position, to say the least.
Yeah, it feels like we're just caught in the crossfire.
And it's not just about the legal battles either.
Right.
People are starting to realize that something is deeply wrong, and
Yeah.
they're not just going to sit back and watch it happen.
So, like, those protests that Richardson mentioned,
Exactly.
those are gaining momentum.
They are, and it's not just random people on the streets either.
Right.
Democratic lawmakers are getting involved too.
Yeah, I remember reading something about them trying to enter government buildings to investigate what's going on.
That's right. They're demanding answers and they're not getting them.
Yeah.
They've even introduced legislation called Stop the Steal to try to halt Musk's actions.
Wow.
It's a direct reference to the stolen election claims that fueled the January 6th insurrection, which I think is a pretty powerful statement.
It definitely sends a message that they're not messing around.
No, they're not.
But is it enough to stop this train wreck?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It really depends on how far he's willing to go and whether the courts and Congress can effectively rein him in.
Yeah. But one thing is clear. This is a defining moment for American democracy.
Right.
The core principles of our government, like separation of powers and the rule of law, are being tested like never before.
And what's at stake here is more than just political power or money.
No, absolutely not.
It's about who we are as a nation and what kind of future we want to build.
Exactly. And I think that's something that a lot of people are starting to realize.
Yeah.
There's a sense of urgency. A feeling that we need to fight for the soul of our democracy before it's too late.
It's a lot to process, honestly.
It is.
It's overwhelming,
It is a lot.
but it's also incredibly important.
It is. And I think one of the most important things we can do is to educate ourselves and each other.
Right.
The more we know about what's happening, the better equipped we are to resist it.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
Speaking of knowledge, I remember you mentioning something about Trump appointing people who share his ideology to key positions.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me more about that? Who are these people and what kind of impact are they having? So it's not just about Musk.
Right.
Trump has been strategically placing loyalists throughout the government, people who share his vision of dismantling the deep state and shrinking the government.
Okay.
One example is Russell Vought, who Trump appointed to a key position in the Office of Management and Budget.
Right.
Vought is a staunch conservative who openly calls civil servants villains.
Wow.
And has made it his mission to gut government programs.
Villains. That's pretty extreme.
It is.
It's like they see themselves as warriors fighting against some evil empire.
All right.
The reality is they're attacking the very institutions that are meant to serve the public good.
Right. And it's not just about budget cuts and rhetoric either.
Right.
They're actively trying to purge dissent from within the government itself.
Oh, wow.
Richardson reports that the Trump administration is offering buyouts to CIA employees who oppose Trump's policies.
So they're not just dismantling programs.
Nope.
They're silencing the people who know how those programs work and can speak out against the dangers of dismantling them.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to create an echo chamber where only their voices are heard.
And it's happening across the board, from scientific research to infrastructure investments to foreign aid.
Pretty much, yeah.
They're systematically targeting anything that doesn't align with their ideology, even if it means harming the country in the process.
It's a dangerous game they're playing.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It is a lot.
And it's not just happening domestically either.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that Trump wants to take over the Gaza Strip.
Right.
What's the latest on that front? Is he actually serious about this?
It's hard to tell what's going through his mind, to be honest.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's even talking about it is deeply concerning.
Yeah.
The situation in Gaza is incredibly complex and fragile.
Right.
And any attempt by the U.S. to take over would be met with fierce resistance and could potentially ignite a regional conflict.
I mean, it sounds completely insane, right? But then again, so much of what he's done has been insane.
True.
And yet, here we are.
And it's not just the potential for violence and instability that's worrying.
Yeah.
It's also the complete disregard for international law and basic human rights.
Right.
There are reports that the U.S. has made a deal with El Salvador to send deportees, including potentially U.S. citizens, to El Salvador's notorious terrorism confinement center.
Wait, what? That can't be right. Sending U.S. citizens to a prison in another country.
I know.
Especially one known for human rights abuses.
It's a very disturbing development.
That's a complete violation of everything we stand for.
It is a blatant abuse of power, and it sets a dangerous precedent.
And it's not an isolated incident either.
Right.
Remember Pam Bondi, the election denier who served as Florida's attorney general?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Trump just appointed her as the U.S. attorney general.
Wow. With Bondi in charge of the Justice Department?
Yeah.
Who knows what kind of abuses we'll see.
It feels like the guardrails are coming off.
Yeah.
And the entire system is about to careen off a cliff.
It's a worrying trend for sure.
And it all points to a fundamental question.
Which is?
What happens to a democracy when the institutions that are meant to safeguard it are eroded from within?
That's the question we all need to be asking ourselves right now.
And it's not just Trump and his cronies who are contributing to this erosion.
Right.
We need to talk more about Musk and what he's doing with DOGE.
Okay.
I mean, we already know about Alez's access to the Treasury systems.
Yeah, that's pretty alarming.
Is there anything else we should be worried about? What else are they up to? So remember how we talked about Alez having, like, admin privileges in the Treasury systems?
Yeah, the master key thing.
Yeah, well, Wired did some more digging, and it turns out it might be even worse than we thought.
Hard to imagine how, but go on.
Well, their sources are saying that Alez now has direct access to systems that control almost all payments made by the U.S. government.
Wait, so this one guy
Yeah,
can basically turn the money on or off for the entire country.
that's what it sounds like. And get this, those same sources told Wired that Alez, and maybe others on Musk's team, have been making extensive changes to the code of the payment system itself.
So not only could they theoretically stop money from going where it's supposed to,
Right.
but they could also cover their tracks and make it almost impossible to figure out what they did.
That's what it seems like. And Richardson's sources inside the Treasury are saying that Musk's team is leaning on existing staff for help, but those people are only doing it to keep the whole system from crashing.
So they're basically holding the government's finances hostage.
It's crazy, right? And they have this major system migration coming up this weekend, and no one knows how these changes Alez made are going to interact with that transition.
Right. So, like, what if they cut funding to programs that Congress has approved, but Trump doesn't like? Senator Schumer actually brought up this point, asking if they might target things like cancer research,
Yeah.
food banks,
Yeah.
veterans aid.
That's what makes this whole thing so terrifying.
Right.
These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These are real people's lives that are being affected.
It's not a game.
Yeah, we're talking about food, healthcare, education, safety, the very things that a functioning government is supposed to provide.
And they're doing it all under the guise of efficiency and cutting waste.
Right.
But who decides what's wasteful?
Yeah, it's also subjective.
Exactly.
And the potential for abuse is enormous.
This is where that whole AI thing becomes even more concerning, you know?
Yeah.
They keep talking about using AI to find waste and fraud, but what does that even mean? Those terms can be so easily manipulated,
Right.
twisted to fit whatever agenda they're pushing.
It's like they're trying to create this system where they have complete control over the flow of information and resources,
Right.
and they're using AI as their weapon of choice.
And it's not just about money either. Remember Trump's plan to take over Gaza?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's not just some off-the-cuff remark. It's a reflection of a deeper worldview, one that sees power and dominance as the ultimate goals, regardless of the human cost.
It's a very dangerous and disturbing worldview. And unfortunately, it seems to be gaining traction in certain circles.
Which is why it's more important than ever to stay informed and engage.
Yeah.
Don't just passively consume the news. Question everything, dig deeper, and connect the dots.
And don't be afraid to speak out.
Exactly.
Talk to your friends and family.
Right.
Contact your elected officials. Support organizations that are fighting for democracy and accountability.
Because in the end, the future of our democracy depends on the actions of informed and engaged citizens.
Yeah.
This is our country, and we have a responsibility to fight for it.
So what started as a deep dive into some pretty intense news stories has turned into a conversation about the very foundations of our society.
It has.
It's overwhelming, to be honest, but it's also incredibly important.
It is a lot to take in, but I think the key takeaway here is that knowledge is power.
Yeah.
The more you understand about what's happening, the better equipped you are to navigate this complex and rapidly changing world.
So keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better future. And remember, you're not alone in this.
You're not.
There are millions of people who share your concerns and are working to make a difference.
This is a moment that demands our attention,
Yeah.
our critical thinking, and our action.
Right. Yeah.
The choices we make now will shape the course of our nation for generations to come.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. And as always, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.